Ever since my 13-inch MacBook Pro died, I've been stressed out on what I should be doing for the rest of the month. Without my laptop, I can't do the majority of my schoolwork, and I can't continue editing videos and doing the stuff I want. Fast forward to today, I then decided to buy a 16-inch Intel MacBook Pro. Now before you say anything like, wow, this random guy on the internet just wasted his money for a totally obsolete e-waste product that Apple should never sell, you should have gone for the Apple Silicon Mac, blah blah blah, stuff like that. You gotta understand my needs and workflow. Now, why Intel, you might ask? Well, it's because of Intel and x86 apps. I like the idea of legally having macOS and Windows on the same computer, because I don't want two heavy workstation notebooks on my backpack, and I prefer having Intel x86 apps to run natively. And why not throw a little bit of gaming as well? Why this though? Is it good for your money? Well, I bought that 13-inch MacBook Pro, which is currently dead, back at September 2021 at more than $2,000 for a Core i5, 16 gigs of RAM, and a terabyte of storage. As for the 16-inch, I got it for only about $1,300. Good deal, right? I mean, this thing has a Core i9 that screams hot as hell, 64 gigs of RAM, a terabyte of storage, which I think is not a good deal, and of course, the AMD Radeon Pro 5500M GPU with 8 gigs of GDDR6 video memory. All of this in a slim portable package that just weighs 2 kilograms. I had a good time with this laptop. It's powerful, at least for me, it fits my needs, and it works well. Well then, if you say it's a great laptop, then why is the title of this video The Least Reliable Mac Notebook? What's the issue you're having? Well, a few days after buying the laptop, this happened. That does not look good at all. What is this kind of issue, you might ask? Well, this looks like a GPU issue. Wait, what? Is it the whole 2011 MacBook Pro GPU issue again? Yes. Well, not exactly. Ever since that happened, I feel like day after day, the issue keeps happening more often, and I can already feel that the GPU is asking for me to end its suffering. I couldn't even edit videos for more than half an hour before this thing starts to appear again. After some digging around the internet, it seems that this issue occurs to MacBook Pros that are manufactured in early 2020, because when looking for other similar victims on the internet, most of them were published in that date. However, most of the results weren't exactly the same, because none of them described the screen glitching that was seen earlier. But the thing that's similar is actually located on the panic report. Opening up the console app on macOS and clicking crash reports will tell me exactly what causes the panic and all that glitchy mess. Most of them were pointing at Windows Server being faulty, and some of them even reported that it was an x86 CAT error, which stands for Intel Catastrophic Error. And the other one points out a GPU panic, and most of the time they were in different panic strings. That right there is what led me to speculate that it's the AMD GPUs that's being faulty. But how do I test and prove that it's the AMD GPU's fault? I set up 2 test environments where I'll be using only the AMD GPU by turning off automatic graphics switching on the battery settings, and try to edit a Final Cut Pro video for as long as possible. And if that's not enough, I have a second test environment. I'll even go as far as installing Windows on this thing and play the funny hat game for as long as possible. Alright, so test environment number 1. How long does the GPU survive before it decides to show the middle finger to me and kernel panics? Keep in mind I'm doing this in an air-conditioned room, so heat shouldn't even be an issue here. When I boot the Mac up, it starts up just fine, so I logged in and fired up Final Cut Pro. During the first few minutes, everything was going okay. Smooth video editing with no issues at all. A few moments later, I moved the laptop by sliding it across the floor surface, and the screen blanked out of nowhere. What? It died immediately just because of me moving the laptop carefully? That's weird. Alright then, a hard reset should fix the issue, right? No, it did not. Instead, it brought me to this weird, creepy looking startup screen. And letting it boot is useless because right before entering the login screen, the fans scream and kernel panics. It boot loops for several times because the GPU freaked out a couple of times, and Finally, when there are no weird lines on the screen, it will let me boot to the login screen. When looking at the kernel panic, would you look at that? GPU panic. I don't know what the rest of this guff means, but that GPU panic string right there is already a strong indication that the AMD GPU is at fault here. Thankfully though, Final Cut Pro saved most of my edits before it decides to die, so thumbs up to Apple's Final Cut Pro developers. Alright, so everything is fine then, right? No. Just a few seconds after launching Final Cut Pro, it immediately freezes and presents me with these beautiful graphical glitches and artifacts. The touch bar wasn't even responding. I left it for quite a while, and a few minutes later, it presents me with even more graphical glitches before the fans decides to scream and kernel panic the entire Mac. Luckily though, after booting up the Mac from panic attack, the graphical glitches on the setup screen didn't trigger, so it will actually take me to the login screen and the main desktop straight away, except that it didn't and froze on me. I hit the Mac gently, and the graphical artifacts appeared before it had a panic attack again. I pressed the power button again and okay, this time it looks fine. Just please let me go to the desktop. And sure enough, it did. Alright, back to Final Cut Pro. This time I actually had a good amount of time editing the video, a solid 20 minutes of work, before it decides to freeze and show me this beautiful light show again just by pressing the space key. I can't leave it for any longer, so I have to force shut it down. Booting it back up, and nothing shows up. Force shutting it down and booting it back up again, this showed up. What the hell, Apple? I tried giving the GPU a good massage, but still, no avail, and showed me these lines in the boot screen. That only happened once though, and a second try lets me boot to the login screen. Signing in, and macOS blames it on a third-party kernel extension and disables every single one of it. Apple logic at its best. Going to the panic log in the console app is useless because it straight up blames Windows Server for causing the panic. Closing the console app and opening up Final Cut Pro, the GPU lets me edit for a few seconds before the screen goes blank and kernel panics. After rebooting, there are even more lines appearing on the screen and the prohibited signs showed up. Resetting the Mac again, the lines showed up again. I can't stand it anymore. Alright, do those evidences convince you that this is a serious GPU issue? No? Because I still have another test environment that I want to show, just in case if you still don't believe me. Test environment number 2. Can you replicate this on another operating system? Well, yes. Intel Macs have the ability to officially install Windows through the Boot Camp Assistant app. Yes, I am definitely using my time correctly and I'm definitely not wasting my precious time. After leaving it for quite a while, I boot the Mac back up while holding down the Option key to show the boot selection menu and oh for fuck's sake. Like I said, I'll be booting the Mac up and holding down the Option key to show the boot selection menu and select the Windows partition. Please wait. Alright, this time, please boot to Windows. There we go. See, I even had the funny hat game installed. Opening up Task Manager, you can indeed see that there's the silly AMD Radeon Pro 5500M GPU over there. And when trying to launch Steam, it's pointless, the screen is blank now. That's fine, we can try again. Boot the Mac up, let it boot to Windows, and boom! Windows starts up just fine, with no lines whatsoever. Just try that again. For fuck's sake. Okay, maybe this time it'll work. I left it for a long while, just please let me boot to Windows. And it did. Thank God, I can finally test if Ahead in Time is playable or not. Letting it boot while the lines appear surprisingly works on Windows, but the GPU is disabled, and if I try to launch Ahead in Time, it would straight up crash because the game requires a proper graphics card. So I can't even test it because the GPU kept freaking out right after a few seconds of booting to the main desktop. Booting to macOS with the lines also work on macOS, though you have to use save mode for that, and oh my goodness, everything is painfully slow. I then had an idea. Why not use an external display then? Sure, I pulled out my monitor, grabbed the power adapter, plugged the power adapter, attach the power adapter to the monitor, find a USB-C to DisplayPort cable, if I can find it. There it is. Plug the USB-C to the MacBook, plug the DisplayPort to the monitor, and finally turning on the MacBook by attaching it to a power source. Sure enough, it boots just fine. You can see over there, AMD Radeon Pro 5500M, just to show that I'm using the MacBook and not another PC. And would you look at that? It actually boots to the game. The GPU actually survived longer than using the internal display. Alright, I'm tweaking the settings a little because a game reinstall usually resets the graphics settings, and oh my goodness, really? You survived this long but then you decide to die at this? Okay, maybe give it a second chance. Force shut it down, turning on the computer with the power adapter again, and for fuck's sake, as I said, boot to the laptop with the power supply, and okay, thank goodness the lines are not there. Just select Windows, okay nice, boot to the desktop, good, run the game, turn down the settings to the lowest so that the GPU won't die sooner, and oh my goodness, without even loading the main world, the GPU already dies. Alright, all of this sums up to one thing. The GPU is completely fucked. It's quite obvious. All of those evidences prove that it's the GPU's fault. Now, let me explain what's going on. I want to go a bit more technical here, so please bear with me. During the boot up process on 15 or 16-inch Intel MacBook Pros with a discrete graphics card, macOS will always start with a discrete graphics card. That explains the artifacts and lines that happens in the Apple logo when the GPU died from a panic attack. That explains the lines on the boot selection menu. That also explains the lines on the diagnostic menu. That also explains why macOS will boot in safe mode with all the graphical glitches going on. To further complicate things, macOS completely hides the integrated GPU during the boot up process in the BIOS. That's why you can't install Intel GPU drivers or even use it in Windows. It's only accessible on macOS. You might think, well, if it's the AMD GPU's fault, then why don't you use the integrated GPU only? Well then, it would completely defeat the entire purpose of me having a giant workstation laptop then. Even if I can disable it, I still can't completely bypass the graphics card on startup. Like I said earlier, the Apple UEFI BIOS boots with the AMD GPU and hides the integrated GPU on startup, and only letting it access once it reaches macOS. Now, I can theoretically disable the AMD GPU and only use the Intel integrated graphics through software by using terminal and typing sudo pmset-a GPU switch 0. I can force macOS to only use the Intel GPU while keeping the AMD GPU away from being used. What do these all mean, you might ask? Sudo means you're running the command as root, pmset is the power management setting command on macOS, the -a switch means on all power conditions, whether it's on battery or power adapter. GPU switch is the undocumented option on the pmset command with settings 0, 1, and 2. 0 meaning only integrated graphics, 1 meaning only discrete graphics, and 2 meaning automatically switch between both based on needs. Gosh, that's a lot of explanation. Sorry, I'm off track. Anyway, using that command I mentioned earlier, it definitely solves the issue and serves as a temporary solution. But here's the problem. It doesn't completely disable the AMD GPU, it only ignores it. So if the GPU goes out of whack in the background, I couldn't tell as soon as possible. The behavior of it is quite strange too. When the GPU freaks out, the desktop looks fine, but apps are unresponsive. I can try opening an app through Launchpad, and it bounces on the dock, but then the window wouldn't appear. Opening up system information and going to the graphics/displays pane only freezes the app. It continues like this until it decides to kernel panic. If you still think it's the internal display's fault, well, that external monitor expert would like to have a discussion with you. It's already a clear indication that the AMD GPU is the one that's making me and my wallet cry. I even went as far as to open the laptop up, painfully removing the motherboard and replacing the thermal paste. Even with all that, the issue still persists. Look, buying a second-hand, used electronic devices is good, and it is a win-win for the planet. When a person buys a new laptop, They can sell their old laptop for others to use and be happy with instead of it being e-waste. I still prefer an Intel Mac because, like I said at the beginning of the video, I like the idea of being able to legally run Windows and macOS at the same machine. I don't want a separate Windows device just to play one video game that I happen to love and adore. I know that Apple Silicon Max blows these Intel machines away out of the dust in terms of battery life to performance ratio, and I'd love to try out an Apple Silicon Mac for my video editing needs. But like I said earlier, I only need one powerful laptop that can run macOS legally and to game on Windows. I don't care if the battery life sucks, I just want the fast performance and the ability to run my favorite game on Windows. However though, I just happen to be unlucky to stumble upon this faulty 16-inch Intel MacBook Pro. Thanks for watching my silly rant over my broken 16-inch Intel MacBook Pro because, yeah, I have to do this because I have a video planned before making this video. I actually don't want to make this video because I was gonna praise the Intel MacBook Pro that I bought recently, but just because of this silly issue, I'm making this video right now. Yeah, I'll see you later for real this time. Thank you so much for watching my rant.